Já puderam testar o Dragon Age da Veilguard, aqui essa hands-on, né, essa prévia em hands-on aqui vai da IGN. Então vamos dar uma conferida aqui pra ver se realmente ele tá batendo com o que a gente tá vendo ou se tem algum pormenor ali que as pessoas que puderam testar chegaram a conferir. Manda aquele seu crítico aí no like, se inscreve no canal, mas vamos aqui direto pra gameplay. Bora nessa?
It's been 10 long years since Dragon Age Inquisition, and the expectations for the next game in the series, Dragon Age the Veilguard, seem impossible.
Quando fica muito tempo assim sem, né,
a bevy of behind-the-scenes changes, and an interesting start to its marketing campaign made me a little worried for my most highly anticipated game of the year.
I admire you. What you've been through would break most people.
But one of my biggest concerns, based on early previews, was that it could be headed in the direction of being a linear action game, rather than its more open-world predecessor. While Dragon Age is known for changing its style with each installment, I hoped dearly that it wouldn't lose too much of the DA DNA I fell in love with. After hours of hands-on time spread across 2 days, I'm pleased to say that I walked away with excitement and curiosity, but mostly relief to wave many of those concerns goodbye.
Opa! Impressão positiva, vamos ver.
My time with the Veilguard covered a wide smattering of things, including the incredibly expansive character creator, the introductory quests, a faction mission, and a companion quest a little deeper into the game. But I was mostly pleased with my ability to just explore Northern Thedas in all its gorgeously designed glory, experiencing a setting in Dragon Age lore that we've really only heard about. To be clear, the Veilguard isn't the open-world playground that Inquisition was. As game director Corinne Bush has previously stated, it's more mission-based. But what impressed me after the first few hours was how much exploration can still be done in the various regions, as well.
Cara, eu falo isso com vocês sempre, né, cara? Nem tudo precisa ser open world. Se é um cenário linear, porém o level design da linearidade ela ser bem trabalhada, por muitas vezes consegue fazer coisas bem mais divertidas do que um cenário mundo aberto. Claro que tem propostas e propostas, né? Mas eu acho que uma não necessariamente apaga a outra, né? Só porque existe mundo aberto que a gente tem que fazer todo o jogo ser mundo aberto.
As well as the impact the player character, Rook, can have on those regions.
And there we go. Easy. Wow. Isn't that something?
Espero que esse seja o caso aqui, né?
Something of a mix of Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. The more streamlined approach of the former with the geographically and socio-politically diverse world of the latter. Of course, some of the bigger art style, combat, and gameplay changes will be subject to personal taste. But after my time with the Veilguard, I left feeling like these 10 long years just might have been worth the wait. As fans have already seen from the first gameplay trailer, players are dropped right into the city of Minrathous in the middle of the action as Solas prepares a ritual that will devastate Thedas. Luckily, our old friend Varric has recruited you to help, and it barely takes a couple of minutes for the game to put the focus on Rook.
A física do cabelo tá bonita, né?
After a surprisingly concise story recap from Varric, there are a number of aspects the Veilguard starts easing you into. For one, the combat. Gone are the days of Dragon Age Origins' more CRPG-inspired tactical system, offering a style that's a mix of quick action and a mechanic where you can pause and pull up your radial menu. While this absolutely does take some getting used to, and it'll be a gradual process to create what could be a highly customized build while learning all your companion's different abilities, it didn't take me long to actually start having fun with it.
A gente fez uma react da progressão de personagem, quem não viu, dá uma olhada aí, foi um dos últimos vídeos do canal, eu acho. E é interessante ver se essa gameplay, ela... Mas essa galera que fica querendo muito a vibe do Orange, essa gameplay ela não é necessariamente ruim. Acho que a primeira gameplay que eles mostraram ficou ruim pelo fato de não ter muita habilidade. Mas eu acho que se os inimigos te forçarem a você explorar essas coisas da gameplay, acho que vai ser legal.
I largely played mage and rogue builds during my hands-on time, and also quickly started to lean on certain companions' abilities. For one, the mage healing ability was essential. For one particularly difficult remnant, I basically established a pattern where I was only using Balara's mana to heal me, dodging and playing it safe when it got too risky. Nev's ability to slow time was also one I kept returning to, offering a bit more control on the battlefield when the situation got a little too fast-paced.
Agora que te permite bater mais
and
o
for
bicho.
you glass cannon builds out there, you'll want to have a warrior around to taunt your enemies out of your way.
O que foi exatamente o que não fizeram ontem, né, na gameplay que a gente reagiu, cara. Que foram os próprios desenvolvedores da EA. É óbvio, né, mano?
No problem.
Like a whole lot in the Veilguard, combat revolves around your companions, even though you can't fully take control of them like in previous Dragon Age games.
É, isso aí é que a galera não gostou muito, né, de não poder controlar diretamente.
Together, and there are certainly opportunities to build team synergy. Oh, and you'll want to listen to your companions in combat too, as they'll occasionally drop some useful hints. But combat aside, your dialogue choices, your rook's background, and the frequent decisions you make are immediately important, which shouldn't be too surprising for fans of BioWare games. The dialogue wheel is back, of course, as is the approval-disapproval system.
We haven't got a lot of time. Varric said you had a lead on Solus?
You get right to the point.
But I was surprised to see that the Veilguard actually explains the consequences of some of your dialogue choices in very clear terms.
See, you say that.
It's a variation of the so-and-so will remember that system, but more specific.
But we do have
Ele não só fala que aprovou ou
now,
desaprovou, né? Ele dá uma mais.
Take, for example, my first confrontation with Solus, aka Fen'Harel, aka the Dreadwolf. I chose a more sarcastic, humorous approach with him, and at the end of our confrontation, text on the side of the screen informed me that I have traded verbal jabs with Solus.
This is your responsibility now.
It was far from the only occurrence of this sort of text, and it leaves me curious as to how your relationships with various characters will build and branch out over time based on your attitude. Speaking of consequences,
Eu acho que, tipo assim, aprova ou desaprova não é uma coisa que vai, talvez, interferir muito na gameplay. Ele apenas vai aumentar ou diminuir tua relação. Agora, aqueles que mostram exatamente o que você falou, ele pode ter uma consequência, sabe? Tipo, ali pra frente, em algum outro momento.
Quickly became clear to me that there would consistently be tons of choices in the Veilguard that'll have lasting results. It probably sounds like I'm stating the obvious here, but I got the sense that even more of these kinds of choices might be peppered throughout than the usual BioWare game. Right at the beginning, for instance, I made a choice that led to Harding getting injured, and she was still bruised up for the remainder of the next couple hours. I felt like a real jerk about it, and that was probably the point. Dragon Age the Veilguard seemed to be telling me, right from the start, that I'm going to feel like a jerk a lot.
You don't slow down for much, do you?
Without spoiling too much, you'll also be able to see some of your progression and choices in the environment around you as well. But once introductions were out of the way, it was time to explore the wide world of Thetis and see its past and present collide.
Shall we?
Let's do this.
As mentioned earlier, one of my biggest worries was that the Veilguard could end up being more linear in its approach, trading branching gameplay for a straight line. And sure, the opening hours, essentially the tutorial zone, are a little railroady, save for a couple key decisions you have to make. But once you're past that and more established within Act 1, you're much more free to tackle quests as you please as you unlock more and more regions. You do this via the Crossroads. For those of you who aren't brushed up on your Dragon Age lore, that's a nexus between the waking world of Thetis and the metaphysical realm of the Fade, through which the ancient elves would travel through magical mirrors called Alluvians. You now use the Alluvians for that same purpose, and to unlock new regions, you have to fight through certain areas of the Crossroads before you can start fast traveling to them. Unlocking said regions opens up a vast network of areas, and not unlike past Dragon Age games, they're dramatically different from one another.
Pouco sobre essa exploração também a gente viu na gameplay passada, né?
Take, for example, the Arlethan Forest, a gorgeous, colorful region that mixes greenery with elven magic. You can see nugs burrow into the grass, magical artifacts abound, and there's a vast array of nature to simply admire. You're hit with a massive tone shift, however, when you head to Hossberg.
Lavendel Village. Whatever happened here looks like Demeter's Crossing.
Currently under siege by the Blight, here is where you'll see some of the more horror-inspired aesthetics, and frankly, just some of the grosser aspects of the Blight. While the Veilguard's tone certainly leans more high fantasy in places like the Crossroads, don't worry. Those who miss the gore and dark fantasy of Origins will find that too in places where the Blight has spread.
Interessante.
But I couldn't help but spend a lot of my time just running around in Treviso, the bustling city that's home to the Antivan Crows faction. For one thing, a lively city feels like a novelty in Dragon Age. But there was simply so much to explore that I kept getting sidetracked. A merchant with unique items here, a new quest to pick up over there, and a random combat encounter over there. And that's just when I wasn't looking around for a cat or dog to pet. Because yes, you can pet the cats and dogs.
Falamos, e os grifos também, pela última gameplay que a gente
Outside of the
viu.
cats and dogs, there are some unique ways to interact with the environment as well. Each companion has an environmental ability, some of which came in quite handy for me. In my time in the Arlethan Forest, I frequently called upon Balara, whose environmental ability allows her to tinker with magical artifacts. In a nice quality of life feature, your companions don't even need to be in your party in order for you to use these abilities.
Nossa, eu já ia perguntar, imagina se a gente vê um negócio no cenário e o companheiro não tá no grupo e tem que voltar.
As an aside, another one of my favorite quality of life additions is the fact that party banter pauses and picks up again later if you trigger combat, a cutscene, or anything else that would interrupt their dialogue. That's right, no more awkward standing around in order to hear the complete conversation.
Isso aí desde, sei lá, acho que foi o Uncharted 4.
If you're feeling overwhelmed, the difficulty and accessibility options do allow for about just as much or as little hand-holding as you need. For example, with one Antivan Crow's quest I was doing, I could turn the navigation on and simply follow the game's guidance, or turn it off and look for clues in the environment to follow. In this case, the crow's purple symbol painted on certain walls.
Another mark this way.
I also just happened to be playing an Antivan Crow Rook while completing this
Agora,
quest.
vou fazer um questionamento pra vocês. Vocês... Como é que eu posso falar? Vocês fazem o esforço, que não é muito esforço, mas... Me falta a palavra certa, mas vocês vão atrás de customizar a experiência que vocês querem ter via acessibilidade? Eu devo admitir que eu acho isso uma opção legal no papel, mas eu não faço. É tipo assim, qual que é a experiência que o jogo quer me passar? É essa, então eu vou. Sabe? Mas eu acho interessante ter essa opção. Acho que eu só mudo se, tipo assim, tá me incomodando. Deixa eu ver se tem como eu tirar. Igual foi os puzzles do Star Wars Outlaws. Tava me incomodando, deixa eu ver se tem como tirar. E tinha. Entendeu?
Which led to some fun dialogue options.
We crows are all the army Antiva has, but it's not like we can feel the garrison.
Once I was in the thick of things, I could clearly see the features in the Veilguard that boiled down to, okay, we heard the complaints about Inquisition, specifically addressing the infamous Hinterlands problem, which is a reference to the first open-world area players visit in Inquisition. The zone was packed with more than 50 side quests, many of which boiled down to mere fetch quests, and it left many players drowning in a bevy of checklists that felt inconsequential to the story. The Veilguard has boiled this down quite a lot. You're still free to explore, but the scope isn't nearly as dizzying, and the quests point back to the main story, a region or faction, or a companion. Another clear reaction to criticisms of Inquisition are our villains in the Veilguard, Algernon and Gillenane. The two elven gods feel much more present throughout the events of the early game than Corypheus, the frankly lackluster baddie of Inquisition.
Whatever comes, we're ready for a fight.
Words easily said, but rarely proven.
While there's a whole lot more Thedas to see and talk about, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it back home to the lighthouse.
A base de operações.
The lighthouse will likely be the most important location of the Veilguard, serving as the hub for you and your companions. Each one of your companions has their own room, and conveniently, a light shines outside of their door when they have a cutscene available. Once you get further into Act 1, it certainly starts to feel more lived in, and you can discover some pretty charming character quirks. For example, I found that Emmerich's skeletal assistant Manfred enjoys spending time on the balcony, and we even got a few games of rock, paper, scissors in. The lighthouse is also, obviously, where you're able to do some housekeeping, especially when it comes to the caretaker.
Offer, dweller. I will answer.
This wildly helpful spirit is always standing by to help you enchant and upgrade armor for you and your companions. But I found the lighthouse somewhat symbolic of one of the biggest challenges this game is facing, bringing in new players while honoring the now incredibly vast lore that Dragon Age has built across the games, comic books, short stories, and more.
É isso aí que é realmente complicado, cara. E eu falo por mim mesmo, né? Porque conheço Dragon Age, mas eu nunca cheguei a jogar nenhum Dragon Age e tal. Então, eu tô muito interessado aqui no The Veilguard, mas assim... E aí, toda essa lore toda? Porque parece que tá seguindo aqui, né?
Basically, if you were worried that the name change from Dragon Age Dreadwolf would mean less Solus, think again. His history, along with the history of the other elven gods, is baked into the lighthouse, and you learn more and more about the threat you face as you unlock Solus's murals with various wolf statues.
Isso aí tá bem claro, né? Apesar de ter mudado de Dreadwolf pra The Veilguard, a gente vê que o Solus ele tá bem presente ali na narrativa principal. Inclusive... né? O Dreadwolf é um nome muito melhor. Se fosse botar Veilguard, que deixasse sem o The. Dragon Age Veilguard.
You even get to see some of his memories firsthand.
They need gods who can protect them.
We are not gods. You will learn that.
As a lore nerd, I very much appreciated this, as well as the various other callbacks to series history. The Origins fans will likely love the Grey Warden heavy quests, and we already know the Inquisitor will be involved in some way, as you can recreate them and select your world states in the character creator. But I do wonder if it'll overwhelm new players, which BioWare certainly seems to be courting with its action-heavy combat system. That's why it helps, at least, to have something of an outsider like Rook to take the helm of the Veilguard. Plus, the scrappiness of Rook reminded me a bit of playing as Hawk in Dragon Age 2, rather than the more Chosen One-esque protagonists of the Warden in Origins and the Inquisitor in Inquisition. In short, a lot changed in Dragon Age the Veilguard, but there was so much I was relieved to see stay. The focus on companions and romance, the rich lore, and a gorgeous world to explore. It goes without saying that there's still a ton of the Veilguard that I haven't seen, especially if it's as big as Origins and Inquisition, and it certainly seems like it. But after finishing my preview, I found myself even more eager to dive into it, and much more hopeful that this could be the hit BioWare needs.
Ah, legal, mano. Pô, acho que depois do anúncio catastrófico que eles tiveram ali, né, que foi realmente horroroso, todo o gameplay, assim, parece que tá mais interessante. A primeira talvez não, porque o início do jogo sem habilidade nenhuma. Legal eles falando, né? Ah, aqui você pode fazer tal coisa. E não tava disponível, né? Mas depois dessa primeira gameplay, eu acho que eles, pô, têm acertado bem em como apresentar o jogo aqui pra galera. Tudo que eu tenho visto aqui eu tenho achado bem interessante. Mais uma vez, de uma pessoa que não jogou Dragon Age, né? Nem os outros, mas pelo visto aqui tá legal. Não controlar os Companions, acho que pode ser visto como um downgrade, talvez. Mas tudo depende de como a gameplay foi estruturada. Se ela foi estruturada para que você não precise trocar, ou melhor, que você não sinta a necessidade de trocar, ela é interessante, né? Ela pode ser uma modificação aí da gameplay. Mas diz aí nos comentários, rapaziada, o que você achou. Pelo visto, a galera aqui que testou o jogo tá gostando aqui do Dragon Age, mas fala aí pra mim o que você tá aí na expectativa, o que você achou de forma geral, principalmente se você já jogou. E rapaziada, se curtiu que o vídeo, não esquece de deixar aquele crítico, aquele like, se inscreve no canal, segue a gente nas nossas redes sociais, pode ser que tenha pra aqui. Abraço, até mais e fui!